Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness, and Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we're going to talk about hypnotherapy. There's definitely a lot of misconceptions out there, so I'm here to kind of clear that up. Generally, just kind of a starting point when I'm working with people doing hypnotherapy as one of the many tools that I work with people. Usually, I see it kind of like a blend of sort of like talk therapy, but it's also like meditation combined, because I know a lot of people kind of think when they think of hypnotherapy, they're probably like thinking more like stage hypnosis, which is a much different thing, where someone's going to an entertainment show and that hypnotist is making them like quack like a duck or bark like a dog. And in my style, it's not about giving them suggestions to do something. It's not even making them do anything, really. It's more about like unraveling what's going on in their subconscious mind that's interfering with their ability to do what it is that they want to do. Because I think I'm a huge advocate for traditional talk therapy. I think it's really beneficial to explore and navigate how like your past influences your behaviors now, to develop some awareness about that. But for me, on a personal level, I had done like a decade of therapy, and it was hugely beneficial for me, but I felt like I reached a plateau where like intellectually on a logical level, I could get why I was doing certain things because of my past, my childhood, my parents, my upbringing, but it wouldn't like stop me from sabotaging myself, and my behaviors and my actions and my patterns were still the same. Like I would still date a certain type of person and it wouldn't always end up well. So I had to explore different avenues, like EMDR, and hypnotherapy was one of those tools that really helped me kind of unravel it more on an emotional level and heal on an emotional level, which kind of felt like it was going a bit deeper. So that way I was able to kind of move past it and work through those difficult life situations that happened to me. So yeah, that's kind of like a starting point. I just threw out a lot of information. Do you have any questions for me, Donovan?
Yeah, I have a few. And also a caveat, which is that
Yeah.
I have done some hypnosis, not for hypnotherapy, but for sort of I didn't, it would be called stage hypnosis, but it wasn't, on a stage,
On a
right? I never
stage,
made it that far. I never
Right.
got that deep into it. But I think maybe the first thing for us to tackle is sort of some of the misconceptions or confusion or like the skeptical position, right? Because and I'll just tell a story, which is I went to a hypnotist show and I watched the show, and they, if people haven't seen one before, they kind of just do a couple things to get people relaxed, and then sort of pick and choose out of the audience who seems to be hypnotized, and then have people do certain stuff. I went to a show like that, and having studied psych and being interested in psych, I was like, wow, that's absolutely fake. Like, this is ridiculous. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. But I'm curious what's going on. So I read one book. That's it. I read one book, and it also had like, here's how you hypnotize someone. And I was like, okay, here's how you hypnotize someone. This is super legit. I tried it on my sister, and it worked within like 2 minutes, and she was completely like deep in a trance. And I was, once I saw it and I knew her, and I knew like, oh, she's acting like very different from how she normally does. Like, this trance state is something. Like, I don't know exactly the mechanics behind it. And, I've read up on it, and maybe we can talk about it more. But the way I got into hypnosis and the way that I tried it was thinking that it was fake, and then it worked. So that's a little bit of like kind of my background. And then, I had some other experiences built up on top of that. But I think the first thing that I wanted to tackle is sort of this skeptical position, and go back to what do you see as sort of the differences between stage hypnosis and hypnosis for therapeutic purposes?
Yeah, I'm not saying there's any like there's like stage hypnosis is bad or wrong, and it's entertaining, it's fun, and maybe it can like, I think people think of like the Office Space like situation where he just like wakes up happy, and I'm like, that was a situation that'd be great. And I wasn't trained in that, so I think maybe there's value there. Well, how I was trained and how I practice is the therapeutic modality, where it's not really offering even suggestions or not even like telling them like how they should feel, like, oh yeah, you're gonna wake up magically happy. That would be great, but that's not what I do. Maybe there's some hypnotists that can do that, but kind of what I do is actually kind of get them in a nice relaxed state. It's kind of like a guided meditation first. And then I actually am conversing with them over their areas of concern, really exploring what's going on in their subconscious mind that interferes with them doing what it is that they want to do. Because for me, as a naturopathic doctor, I'm doing a lot of like helping people with their nutrition and their lifestyle plan and meditate and do like a lot of building healthy habits, which is hard for a lot of people. So when they don't get results is because they haven't really stuck with the plan, or they're not doing consistently enough to really see the results. And so I like hypnotherapy as another tool in my toolbox, because it's like giving them the motivation and confidence to actually like do the things that I'm recommending for them. So it kind of like goes in hand and really be able to kind of go deeper on an emotional level. And it's really me asking a lot of questions and kind of like pulling at a thread on a sweater and kind of unraveling, and it's very organic, and there's a lot of imagery that can be really healing. Some examples I utilize it for. I talked about like motivation and confidence is huge. Giving them motivation to do the things that they know that they need to be doing. But another thing is like dealing with inner conflicts, because sometimes there's like a part of us that really wants to eat cupcakes, and then there's a part of us that wants to be healthy. And so it's like dealing with that inner conflict sometimes can be beneficial, or having them imagine their most ideal self and stepping into that. And so they are being that. Another one example is like, if there's past trauma or childhood wounds, having them kind of like go back into their childhood and kind of support and have compassion and love for that child that child didn't receive back then, can kind of be like a healing practice in itself. So it's healing childhood wounds. It's unraveling what are those mental emotional blocks. It can also be for helping people make decisions when they're having like inner conflict or doubt. So those are some of the benefits. So I'm not giving people like, yeah, you feel happy, you feel amazing, and you wake up magical, life is great. How I practice generally, they're conscious, but they're also kind of unraveling what's in the subconscious in a way. So they are going to remember everything that's said and done in the session, but and they're in control the whole time. I can't make you say or do anything that you don't want to do, like especially if it goes against your morality, because I can't like, and it's not mind control in my mind. It's more about just kind of like talking to you while you're in a relaxed state and just seeing what unfolds. Because when you're in a relaxed state, you're kind of have like your intellectual guard a little bit down, so you can kind of be more in your emotions and be more expressive in that way. And so that's kind of how I see it healing, and much different than the traditional stage hypnosis. Although, just a caveat, though, there is like, I think there are some benefits to like that type of hypnosis or style. Like one of my meditation practices that I teach people is called autogenic training, which is kind of like self-hypnosis, but it's more of like, oh, my hand is heavy and warm. My hand is heavy and warm. And it's like auto suggestion. And then your hand gets actually heavy and warm because you've kind of like repeated in your mind. It actually starts to get warm in that sense. So there's some benefits to that, but it's not the focus generally on when I'm working with people.
Yeah, that maps pretty well onto sort of some of the experience and background that I've had. I kind of look at the hypnotic state as like a state of heightened focus, which makes it overlap with meditation quite a bit, because that's basically what meditation is clearing your mind for something. So there's a lot of overlap there. And feel free to jump in if you disagree with anything I say in the next couple sentences. But On top of that, there tends to be like a heightened state of openness or suggestibility,
Mhm.
depending on what the context is, right? You said
Mhm.
in that context, you're not really suggesting anything in particular, but you might be, right? You might be if they're having trouble adhering to a particular plan
Mhm.
or whatnot. So
Right.
I didn't brush up on my science. I probably should have before I came into this conversation. But if I recall, what happens when you're in a trance state is parts like the brain activity actually changes. That's for sure.
Mhm.
I believe it's parts of your prefrontal cortex start slowing down and having less activation. So
Mhm.
that basically means you're not like filtering things as much or like focused as much on uh, kind of the like logical piece like you were talking about before. Now, the mechanisms for how that happens, I don't think are clear.
Mhm.
But there is evidence and research that shows that your brain is actually in a different state during
Mhm.
this piece. And the reason I want to bring that up is just because, like I said, I got into it because I was so skeptical. I was like, this is not real.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to ground down again. So yeah, that maps onto kind of what I've seen is you get into sort of this state where you're really focused and more open to things.
Mhm.
And for stage hypnosis, you kind of can pick and choose from people who are the most likely to go into trance, and
Mhm.
then have them do silly things
Mhm.
because their prefrontal cortex, that part that's filtering for like, is this real or not? Should I do this or not do this?
Mhm.
Is really inhibited.
Mhm.
Whereas other people that I tried to hypnotize, and maybe you've had the same experience, typically went into like a lower trance state, which is to say, just like relaxed, open, and able to
Mhm.
focus on whatever the specific thing is.
Mhm.
And I think it's different than just trying to talk through, like typical talk therapy type of stuff, because
Right.
you are making sure that your baseline is very, very relaxed. And then you're removing all this other stuff. Like when I've
Mhm.
had therapy sessions, when I go to therapy, a lot of times it's a million things going on in my head at once. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to focus, but I can't really because I'm like, oh, this isn't good, but I love this, but not this, but this, right? Like it's just huge, just
Mhm.
dump of everything in my brain, as opposed
Right.
to the times that I have done. Again, I haven't done hypnotherapy, but I've kind of done I've done guided like hypnotherapy,
Yeah.
not with someone, but like with
Yeah.
a
Mhm.
recording.
Mhm.
Same sort of thing. Like it's much easier to tap into, okay, here's the one really specific thing. Um,
Mhm.
and on a completely different note, I wanted to get your take on sort of the differences or overlap between a couple different things. So one is meditation, one is hypnosis. I heard you mention sort of like a visualization type piece.
Mhm.
Um, Also repetition, so sort of this like mantras type of deal.
Yeah.
I'd be curious how you see these different like pieces coming together or pulling apart, or what the whole mesh looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes when it's different when like, yeah, you could do like some self-hypnosis more. I kind of pair that with like meditation in a way. It's like, yeah, maybe you're repeating like a mantra or phrase to yourself, or it's like, sometimes I do that like, oh, you are whole and complete, you are lovable, you are worthy. And that starts to like actually shift your mental emotional state to being a little more positive versus like when you're working with a practitioner like one-on-one in a therapeutic setting, it's not necessarily about those suggestions. At least again, how I practice might be different. It's really just kind of like, it's almost like all the answers are coming from them. I'm not I'm like just like pulling it out of them, and then sometimes they come up with a powerful phrase for themselves that might be like, I'm not going to give them a suggestion. I don't know what's going on in their brain. So it's just me like asking questions and exploring that in a subconscious, or just kind of unraveling it in a more relaxed way. And I wanted to comment back on what you said about like being skeptical, because yeah, I get plenty of skeptical people. And I also want to kind of comment back on like the varying levels of trans state, because that does vary for people. Because I think it's like, I think I'd say 95% of the people are able to get into a trance state when they're working with me, but the degree of how relaxed they are varies. The like maybe the 5% that struggle really hard with it are probably people with like post-traumatic stress disorder, where they're just like they cannot relax. And so if that's the case, I tend to do like biofeedback training, which is like a relaxation training program for them to like learn to train their body to relax first, and then they can get more benefit of the hypnotherapy. But I get like there's the skepticism. What I say is like, yeah, everyone has different degrees of relaxation, but usually people can still relax to even a small degree and still get benefit out of it as long as they continue to talk, because it is a little more focused. Like in hypnotherapy, my hypnotherapy voice is a lot slower. I'm like talking really slow, and it kind of just slows their brain down and they can process and just like focus on the thing that I'm asking. And as far as like the visualizations goes, usually my starting point is like having them visualize a safe space for them, and it's whatever they want to create. Maybe it's a beach, maybe it's a forest, maybe it's like a waterfall, maybe it's like an empty room. For some people, I've had that where it's just like an empty room. As long as they feel safe and comfortable, that's what matters. And then sometimes if I, depending on the situation, I might have them visualize like, oh, is there anything particular in this room that stands out for you? Like go to it and like observe it in more detail. And I'm having them like describe it in such detail. And that it is meditative in a way, because it's like having them focus and describe and be present in the moment, which is kind of like a meditative practice in itself. It's just like being there in the moment. So it kind of just stops their brains from being distracted from all these things. And sometimes their brain still might be busy with like thoughts coming in and out, but generally, since I'm guiding them very clearly and getting them questions, they're able to like focus on what's being said and answer accordingly. So those are some of the things. It doesn't matter if you're skeptical, it still can benefit from you. But I think the bigger thing that I see is probably like fear of like trying it. I think there's like a fear of like, oh, you're gonna like control my brain, or I'm gonna lose, like you're gonna make me do something I don't want to do, or something's gonna, and it's just like you're in control the whole time. I can't make you say or do anything you don't want to do. And the thing is like, if you do it, there might be points where it is uncomfortable because we're maybe exploring your past childhood. I don't usually do childhood stuff right away. Usually we kind of like ease into it with a few other types of sessions first, and then we go into it. But with the hypnotherapy, usually I'd say 90% of people probably feel good after even one session. Like they feel more relaxed, they feel more positive, they feel motivated. But I say, like, again, based on how deeply they were able to relax and get into a quote unquote trance state, depends on how long those feelings will last. So like for some people, maybe that lasts just like a day or two. For other people, maybe that lasts a couple of weeks where they're feeling like good and positive and motivated. But, I'd say like it's important to have like reoccurring sessions. I'd say, most people, it's not one of those things. And there's studies that show instead of doing like weekly therapy sessions for a year, it's not generally like a one and done type of thing usually, although I have helped people resolve their fear of flying with the 2 sessions. But generally, to kind of sustain those positive feelings takes multiple sessions until it kind of becomes a way of being. So I typically recommend like a session every week or 2 for just a few months. It's not like a year. And there's studies that show like 6 sessions of hypnotherapy could be almost as equivalent to like a year of therapy, of traditional talk therapy, because it kind of is interacting in a different way. And so kind of back to my point of like, yeah, to sustain those feelings each time you do a session, the positive feelings typically last a bit longer because you've been able to relax a little bit deeper each time you go. It's kind of like, you're not always fantastic and great at meditation right off the bat, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. Same principles apply to hypnotherapy. We're training in your brain to kind of get more relaxed, and the more you do it, the easier it gets, the longer the effects last, usually. But it takes time. It takes some work, but generally I think it does. Why I like hypnotherapy as one of my go-to tools is just because I feel like it works pretty quickly and effectively. Most people are doing it within like 2 to 6 months with me, and then they're good, and unless something major comes up in their life.
Yeah, that again maps onto sort of what I've experienced. Again, my experience with it was a little bit more offhand and random as opposed to a structured type of therapy I was trying to provide people. But one of the things I wanted to touch on is like the number of sessions, like you were saying. I've 100% seen that.
Yeah.
I had a couple friends as I was kind of dabbling with it who were really interested, and they were probably like somewhere in the middle in terms of ability to get into a trance or to be hypnotized.
Mm-hmm.
And it took between like 3 and 5 times before they were able to really get into it and feel kind of like the full relaxation, or at least what I was expecting or seeing from some of the other people that I did it with, who were very easy to hypnotize. The other thing I wanted to touch on was like going back to kind of this, like, is it mind control, or like, what are you going to make me do thing?
Right.
I think it's really important to highlight that something you mentioned earlier, which is in a hypnotic state, you won't do anything that goes against your moral code, even in a very deep trance. In one of the books I was reading, there was a hypnotist who used to put on shows, and when you can pick from hundreds of people, you can get people who go into a very deep hypnotic state.
Yeah.
So he would do the show, and to prove that particular point out, he would tell them something like, I don't know, there's like a knife or something, and they'd be like, okay, I want you to stab me, and the person would like pick it up and walk towards them, and then just stop near them, and just to prove like, hey, you're not going to do anything outside your morals. I think it's a little crazy, because what if you got like a serial killer that you hypnotize and it's like, oh, I'm okay with this. But the other thing I wanted to mention is there was a couple people that I, as I was doing it kind of experimentally or whatever, that they had a very standoffish attitude of like, this isn't going to work, and I know it's not going to work, and I'm not going to try, but I want you to do it anyway. And it's like, it's like, not going to work if you're not open to it, because the underlying basis is being able to get into a state of relaxation. And if you're sitting there like, in your mind repeatedly going like, I'm not going to do this isn't going to work, this is stupid, I hate this, obviously it's not going to work. You're not going to relax. Right. So I one last thing I wanted to throw out, a story of mine. Do you remember Ty Aller, one of our guests? Yeah. So he's one of the people that I tried to hypnotize while I was how did that go? Kind of learning and messing around with it. And he had a skeptical attitude, but he was still open to it, right? And it was the same sort of progression where like we tried it once, didn't really do too much. Maybe he relaxed a little bit, but not like what you would think of as a trance. Second time, maybe a little bit more, but still really nothing going on. The third time we did it though, I was doing one of when you do like show hypnosis, you do kind of these different tests or stages or things to see how far in a trance someone is. And so I had done a few of them, and they were going, he looked like he was in more of a hypnotic state than previous times. So I tried one of the ones, which is, you're not going to be able to remember the number 3, no matter how hard you try, you won't be able to remember it. So then, I had him wake up just like in like a normal hypnosis show and say like, okay, just go ahead and count to 3. And it was so funny because it was like, I had talked to him a bunch of previous times, like, this doesn't really work, I don't think this is real. And this time he was like, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2. And I was like, and and then there's this whole wind down process to like get people back into a relaxed state and wake them back up and all that. And he was telling me, he's like, it's so weird because in my head, I was still like conscious and aware. And in my head, I was like 3. I'm just gonna say 3 because this isn't like real, and it's fake and it's stupid. And then I couldn't. Yeah. And I just couldn't. And the reason I bring up that story is because it took 3 tries to get even to that level of trance, of like relaxation and whatnot. And again, I was doing some silly things and whatnot, but the more important point is, if you're doing it for kind of like therapeutic purposes, to give it a few tries, like you were saying with like meditation. A lot of people that I met have tried it exactly one time and hated it. And it's just like with anything that you try, really, like you can't just eat one apple and then be like, I ate healthy and it didn't work, so whatever, like I give up. But yeah, so I just really wanted to highlight basically some of the things you said, and reiterate that from my experience, it's the exact same thing. Like multiple sessions do make a big difference. It's only going to work if you're open to it and willing to relax. And it's not like you're not completely disconnected. It's not like mind control. It's not like you're 100% absent. Depending on how deep you get into it, you may or may not remember everything, but it's pretty clearly shown that you're not going to act out of line with your morals. You may act out of character a little bit in terms of being more willing to do silly things, but not to do things that violate what you think is right and wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And in a therapeutic setting, I'm not trying to make you do silly things generally, although I'm like curious because I actually haven't been trained on in stage hypnosis, and I'm like, oh, I kind of want to like experiment because I've only been trained in like therapeutic hypnotherapy, and so I'm like, oh, I wonder what that would be like, because it would be kind of cool to just be like, oh, wake up happy, like Office Space kind of a thing. Maybe that would be a really cool thing. But yeah, it definitely takes like multiple sessions, and the more you do it, the easier it gets for sure. Mm-hmm.
There's another thing that I just thought of, but one of the other things that's very important for having success in being hypnotized, and I imagine it's the same for hypnotherapy, is having good rapport with the person you're doing it with.
Mm-hmm.
Because a big piece of it is, again, it's going into this relaxed state, and it needs to be someone who you see. The only word I can think of is as an authority figure, but not in the sense of like they're in charge of you, but they're competent, someone that you feel safe around, and someone that you're willing to listen to,
right,
and be open to. Again, I'm looking at it from the show side. Yeah, go ahead.
The word that comes to my mind, like what's really key and critical, is like trust in the practitioner. It's really important for them to open up, and that's why I don't generally like on the first session go right into like deep childhood wound. That's like really heavy stuff for some people. So it's like, okay, let's start off lighter, let's build some trust, let's just do some like gentle, lighter visualizations, like safe space. And even then, sometimes, I think it is having people feel a little more vulnerable, I think, and maybe that's part of the fear, in that it's more emotions can be uncomfortable for some people. It's actually very common for people to like cry in a session with me, because it's like they're opening, and they've been like kind of suppressing some emotions, and sometimes that can open it up, and that's scary for people. But if at any time they feel uncomfortable, like we're going down a path and we're starting to like peel back the layers of something that happened to them in the childhood that was traumatic, I always like preface it like, if you don't feel safe or comfortable at any time, just tell me and we can redirect it and go down a different path where you do feel safe. But sometimes they're ready to go. I think I have them kind of like trust their own intuition on if they feel ready or not to go there. And if they do, we'll go there. If not, that's totally okay. We can go down a different avenue. So it is really key and critical for people to feel safe, and it's like, I was about to say safe and comfortable. It's like comfortable, but there's also discomfort. So it's like trust. They have to have trust that, that the practitioner is not gonna, have ill will or try to steer them and push them too hard into like the emotions if they're not ready. I think that's important. But knowing like, sometimes it can be uncomfortable when you're uncovering and unraveling those emotions, but part of that is working through the emotion to process it so you can heal and move on, is part of that healing work.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to highlight for anyone who's considering trying it or has already tried it maybe once or a handful of times, but with someone who they didn't quite click with, just the same as like a normal therapy relationship, a traditional therapy relationship, you need to find someone that you feel very comfortable with and that you're able to share with and open up with. Because if you don't, you're not going to just get to the right level. You're not going to be calm enough. You're not going to be open enough to explore some of those things. So setting that foundation, that baseline of trust is really important.
Totally. Yeah. And I would say, it's not necessarily for everyone. I say it benefits a lot of people, the majority of people, but if it's not the right tool for you, maybe that is just traditional talk therapy. Maybe that is like a different type of therapy, like EMDR. There's a lot of various tools out there, and it's finding the one that works best for you. But again, I've been doing this for well over a decade, and it seems to work pretty well. So it's one of my go-tos, but it's not my only tool. Obviously, I have a lot of different things. And the other, I just remembered another question that I get a lot is, since I have a completely virtual practice now, I'm only doing hypnotherapy virtually on like Zoom, and people are like, that seems weird. They're like much more resistant to doing like a telehealth type of visit versus like even though they'll do like teletherapy because with the pandemic and everything. But as long as there's no like technical glitches like our internet freezes, which happens once in a blue moon, not too frequently. Seems to work just as effectively, surprisingly. And I've been doing it for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. I would have to I mean, obviously, I haven't even done it in a number of years, but I would have to revisit what the way that I learned to do it, because a lot of the pieces involved physical touch of some sort.
Interesting.
But then again, for the more showy type stuff, it is a lot more. You need to see where people are at in their physical state, right?
Yeah.
Because
you
need to see if people are.
It helps to see their face, which I can do on Zoom. Although I have done it over the phone, but I much prefer to do it over Zoom where I can see their face. And sometimes if they're like lying down in their bed, which sometimes it's nice because they can be like, oh, I'm so comfortable in my bed, and they can lie down. I'm like, just point the camera so I can see you and see what your facial expressions are. Yeah, that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, and for therapy, hypnotherapy, you're not going to be doing anything physical, really, I imagine. But in the showy stuff, stuff, it's all the time. You're having people like, you need to have more of a physical presence to be like, is this person in enough of a trance to dance like a chicken right now? Nope, I don't think so. So let's try some deepening techniques and whatnot. So it's just interesting to me because when you first said that, I was like, how would I hypnotize? Oh, well, it's a totally different space and a totally different intention and a totally different intended outcome.
I'm open to letting you do some stage hypnosis on me if you want to pull out your book and dust it off and experiment with your skills, because I don't know if I've ever even had I've had like not necessarily stage hypnosis, but I remember when I was doing my training to do hypnotherapy, I remember one of the visualizations she had us do was like she had us all like close our eyes and just like imagine like a lemon in your mouth, and you're like, she was just like describing it in such details, and you like start to like feel the sourness in your mouth, and I was like, oh, your brain is a really powerful thing. So who knows.
I have been hypnotized at what I would say is probably a light level. And it was really interesting because it was after I had already started doing some of the stuff. Like I tried it at that first show I went to, but not really, because I was doing exactly the thing that I said will make sure it doesn't work, which I was like, this is stupid.
It's not gonna work.
This is fake. This is
Don't relax.
So But after that, I tried it at another show, and it was really interesting because I could sort of feel, I don't even know how to explain it, like a boundary kind of eroding, like me slipping from like, oh, I'm totally conscious, aware, everything 100%, to like, oh, I'm getting like so relaxed, and like, oh, this person up on the stage is saying to like do this thing, like, oh, that's silly, but maybe I'll just do it anyway. And then then I freaked out and went back to my default of just like, nope. And instead of fake, I was just like, I don't want to do this. Like, I'm not willing to be in any deeper of a trance than this. But it was interesting just coming from such a skeptical place. I'm still blown away that the reason I learned it is because like, this is not fake. And I would be curious to know what this just like social phenomenon is. Like, how does this work? Only to have it work and then find out that things in your brain are actually changing and whatnot. It's not just a social like pressure phenomenon.
Right. Yeah. And I think, you make a really good point for people that are skeptical. I think it's healthy to have a little bit of skepticism. But you had an open mind. You were like, okay, well, I'm just gonna really, people have these skepticism about things that they don't know enough about, but you did the research to be like, okay, let's look into this to see if it's like legit. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And sometimes it works for people and sometimes it doesn't. Like a lot of people, they describe to me, sometimes they don't even realize they're in a trance state until after they come out of it. And they're like, oh, I notice like I feel different. Like I feel like way lighter when I come out, or they feel like deep and heavy when they're in it, and then they're like lighter, and it's so like a weird kind of, even though when they're in it, they're like, I just feel like I normally feel. I feel like nothing's really happening, kind of a thing. But they're talking and they're still getting the therapeutic value, and then they come out of it and they're relaxed. And then I had other people that just describe it like a massage for your brain kind of a thing, because it is really relaxing in a way.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest pieces that sticks with me, because like, again, I've experienced it, like what you're saying, right? I've experienced like, oh, this is sort of a different state and it's kind of weird. And then I came out of it and I was like, felt different. And it gives me some comfort, or reduces my skepticism, knowing that there are changes in the brain, even if the mechanisms are not clear. And that's something that tripped me up for a long time, is I was like, how can this be real if we don't know how it's working? But even saying it out loud, like I never really said it out loud, but even saying it out loud, like that's ridiculous. Like it's clear all kinds of things work that I don't know how they work. So like just because the mechanisms behind it aren't clear doesn't mean that the outcomes and changes aren't, things that are actually happening. If I applied that to everything in my life, I would use very few things. Like my car, wouldn't be able to drive because I don't know how my car works. I just know it works.
I don't understand how a plane works, but it somehow does get in the air and gets us to really far places, which is pretty cool. Cool. Well, I think that really summarizes all that I needed to share about hypnotherapy for those that were skeptical or fearful or anything, kind of wanting to know a little bit more. But do you have any other questions, Donovan?
Nope, that's pretty much covers everything that I wanted to talk about as well. It's a tool worth trying.
Yeah.
If you're trying things.
Right.
I've been blown away, like in my experience, how easy it was for some people and how useful it was. Like even the showy stuff, like people would come out of it feeling great and awesome and super relaxed and chill. So I'm sure if it's actually guided toward a more fruitful or useful outcome other than entertainment, that's only amplified. But on the flip side, there was other people, other friends that I had that I tried like 10 times and it just didn't click for them. And I mean, they still got kind of like the benefit of just relaxing for a little bit, but none of those like deeper states.
Right.
Still awesome. So it's worth trying. But it does have hit or miss results, just depending on who people are.
Right. Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. So give it a shot. If you're interested and want to learn more, feel free to send me a message. You can check out our links below. You can figure out how to contact me if you'd like. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.